Sahab, for those who don't know me. And I am affiliated with the Sociology Department as well as with the TVMA, the Thunder Bay Multicultural Association, and Diversity Thunder Bay. And just a couple of announcements, I guess, for people who don't know. I mean, my class do anyway, but for those who don't, he will be giving a second talk, poor guy anyway, right, one after the other, back to back. And that's in room 3004, right, in the AJAC in this case. And Kathy will have a few words to say after the talk and after the questions. So Professor Bengura will talk and then we'll have questions, and then Kathy Woodback from the TVMA, who is the executive director of the TVMA, will do that. And I don't know if Michelle Lander, who's also one of our staff members at TVMA, if she wants to say something. So I would like to welcome all of you on behalf of the Thunder Bay Multicultural Association, Departments of Poli-Sci and Sociology, Muslim Students Association, this is Lake at U, of course, and Multicultural Center, that's at Lake at U, if you don't know. And I'm pleased to present our guest speaker for this afternoon, Dr. Abdul Kareem Bengura. Abdul Kareem Bengura is Professor of Research Methodology and Poli-Sci at Harvard University. He's also researcher in residence of Abrahamic Connections and Islamic Peace Studies at the Center for Global Peace in the School of International Service at American University, mouthful. He's a well sought after for television and radio shows, speeches, lectures, essay and book manuscript reviews, workshops on research methodology and teaching and learning strategies, inter-religious dialogues, training in cross-cultural communication and languages, usage strategies, or it should be cross-cultural communication and language usage strategies, and conflict resolution. He holds only 5 PhDs in Poli-Sci, and you can ask him why. In Poli-Sci, economics, linguistics, computer science, and mathematics. He's fluent in a dozen African and 6 European languages. Professor Bengura is the author, editor, and contributor of only 70 books and more than 600 scholarly articles on the areas, among other things. And in addition to the above areas, Islamic and African civilization, and I try to summarize, right? And gender, ethnic relations, peace and justice. His great passion and strong conviction in equity, human rights, and justice issues, both at the continental and international levels, that he shows in his books, are also clearly reflected in his activism and his presentations. And they include discussions ranging from Africa to Washington, D.C. One of his recent books, titled African Mathematics, From Bones to Computers, 2012, is the winner of the prestigious Cecil B. Curry Book Award for 2012. Did I pronounce this correctly? He's also a member of many scholarly organizations and has served as president and then United Nations ambassador of the Association of Third World Studies. Without further delay, please join me in welcoming Professor Abdul Kareem Bengura. Yeah, it's already there. Isn't it?
Yeah, it's up there. Good afternoon. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Of course, you wonderful folks will know more about your wonderful Canadian society than they may believe that I do. So if I misconstrue anything, get a crapola out of me. And that's what academia is supposed to be. It's a pleasure to be here in Maple Leaf Country and to be invited to talk about multiculturalism, only because we in the United States are missing the boat. We had assumed by electing, quote, a black president, we no longer have ethnic, religious, racial issues, so all will be well in the Republic. So we went to sleep. As you are well aware with the media, we've heard about all these cases of even more racial and multicultural, ethnic and religious schisms that have really reared their ugly head to a much larger degree than we want to admit. Right? Because we liberals have gone to sleep. It was bad when Bush was there as a conservative, so we are galvanized to fight, to struggle. But now that we have our own liberal president, it should be okay. We don't speak out anymore. So at the end of this talk, I am going to applaud the Canadian people, even though I may start out a little bit strong with them, because we also have to look at the truth, or else our scouts will become nothing but a facade. The great people, I will introduce, I'll suggest, after looking at the problem briefly, how we can deal with these issues from an African-centered aspects, Islamic-centered aspects, and then conclude. And of course, I'm quite sure you've seen these nice pictures. Ontario can't afford religious discrimination. Damn right, we cannot afford religious discrimination anywhere. And that nice one on the right-hand side, Canadian Immigration Board. I'm applying for asylum on the grounds of racism. Granted! Yeah, racism is not for us. And then the last poster which I like, go back to Africa, go back to Mexico, and then what do you do with the originals? Same thing. Social, racial and religious discrimination in Canada is real. We do a good job in trying to pretend sometimes that it doesn't exist, but it does. And what I did was to be very casual in the beginning, just to see what was going on. So I do the Google search, and the type of search I did was just to see how many people are talking about the phrase racial discrimination in Canada. On March 14, 2013, that was just last week. And then I said, I'm a computer scientist, I can do better. So let's do some data mining. So that way we shift off all the ones that are just casually talking, and then let's go really to people who deal with the real issue. And then it really struck me. I got 14,201,300 yields hits. People who are just talking, really have written and have really made statements about actual racial incidents or actual racial encounters in this great country. And only 0.25 seconds. And then I said, okay, give me religious discrimination in Canada. I did some data mining again, so that way I sift off just the person who was just running their mouths, and I came up with 2,420,000 results for the same number of seconds, 0.25. So whether we want to believe it doesn't exist, the perception is out there with the general public that it does exist. As we all know, perception becomes reality. So what then do we do to change those perceptions or to change the reality? So we can look at some serious works. Because sociologists and psychologists tell us what? All of this thing begins with ignorance that leads to prejudice, that creates what we call discrimination. And when we start looking at the plethora of evidence of what really exists, I ran into some very interesting things like the Canadian Council for Refugees that talked about secret trials and prolonged detentions. Talks about detention, interrogation, and humiliation of Muslim travelers that come to Canada. They talk about vandalism against mosques. They talked about being labeled as supporting terrorism. Of course, Islam now is now used in conjunction with the word Islamic terrorists. which is an absolute oxymoron. If we cannot label the Jeffrey Dahmers, the building, as Christian terrorists, why don't we just call those bozos who do commit crimes in the name of Islam as just terrorists? Why do we have to attack the label Islam? Distorted representation in the media. And of course, media has to sell. And our Canadian Broadcasting Service is also very honest in its results of a survey that was conducted from May 12 to 15 by the Ipsos Research Company and commissioned by the Dominion Institute to mark the International Day for the Elimination of Racial Discrimination in Canada. This is great. At least people realize that something has to be done. Not like us in the US where we are having an amnesia to deny, not to even address the issue head on. So roughly 4 million people have been victims of racism according to the CDC, and a greater number, 13%, to report that they will never marry or have a relationship with someone other than their race. That is unfortunate. And of course, the Canadian Human Rights Report that talks about the mortality versus Marguerite Bourgeois, I hope I pronounce it right, Commission Scolaire versus Commission Scolaire, about the case of Singh and the Kirpa argument that went all the way up to the highest court. It's only then the highest court find that it was really religious discrimination, and they ordered that the poor young guys, lawyer fees and everything be paid back. And Elizabeth Thompson of the Parliamentary Bureau tells us about results in an in-depth opinion poll that shows that the week of January of that year, that the largest marketing poll revealed that a majority of Canadians have heard of a racist comment in the past year, that is 2009, and nearly a third witnessed a racist incident. There we also read from David Seljak, an associate professor of religious studies at Jerome University in Waterloo, and chair of the Department of Religious Studies, who provided social and historical context within which some of these acts take place. And I will not read the long quote. And then Rachel DeCoste reminded us of the great case in Canada in 1943, right here in Ontario, the state of Ontario. And unfortunately, as if many of us have not learned anything, now we disguise it with different labels. Instead of in those days when we used to accuse people of being communists, now we call them Islamic terrorists, now we call them anarchists, and all sorts of labels so that we can deal with them as we see fit. So then it's not trivial that ignorance leads to prejudice, which leads to discrimination. And I'm quite sure all of us know the definitions for those terms as college students, so there's no need to spend more time on that. So then educationists or educators have told us that there are certain ways we can do things to make sure we combat these three triplets of our sins. And then, of course, there's what we call relevant pedagogy. So diversity theory then tells us what? We have to teach strategies in classrooms and also work with young environments to help students and other people in the environment to understand racial, ethnic, and cultural groups by attaining skills, knowledge, and attitudes needed to function effectively within the society. So we cannot just deny that it doesn't exist. We can't just be oblivious to it. We have to say, yes, it exists. And then what do we do, not only to educate ourselves, but to educate others around us? Because even those who we may be discriminating against may have their own sense of prejudices. But if we all just run away from each other, we will not learn about those prejudices, nor can we deal with them effectively. And then there's equity pedagogy. And we see that in academia, we teach. Those of us who are professors. And we get fought in classrooms when we're trying to bring in other perspectives in class. Oh, you just being an Afrocentrist. You just being an Islamic centrist. Why do we need that? Why don't we just stick with Plato and Aristotle and all these great thinkers? Well, there are other great thinkers in other cultures too. That we also have to be open-minded to learn things from. Matter of fact, I got fought for the book that won the Bengura Award, African Mathematics. I got beat up by a multicultural mathematician. Why the hell do you have to talk about African mathematics? Why is it not just mathematics? Well, the truth is that when I read those mathematics books, I never see any citations of African mathematicians in the books. And we all know that the way you feel about yourself, the way you see represented in literature, also gives you the zeal, gives you the enthusiasm to study. And we begin to wonder in the United States why we don't have a lot of black kids studying mathematics. We have to change that. And the book I'm working on now is Islamic mathematics. Because African mathematics led me to Muhammad ibn Muhammad Sultani, the great Nigerian mathematician. And that's inspired me to look at more mathematics from the Quran all the way to the sages of mathematics. They are there, this kind of the information there, but nobody has been able to piece them together and to travel to some of these great libraries and museums in Muslim societies to bring out this information. And that is what I'm working on now. So, what is the debate about multiculturalism? Well, the opponents say it waters down the skills and knowledge students actually need to succeed. And the supporters counter. They say presenting knowledge from a single perspective actually represents the watered down version of learning. Greater creativity and critical thinking skills are developed with what? A more complete and accurate understanding of society. And then the opponents say it's anti-white and anti-male. Supporters say education for all students is improved. Even white males are being cheated by not being exposed to other perspectives. Because if you say, okay, let's just take Plato and Aristotle, this great Greek, everything began in Greece, they feel good. But what are they missing from the other perspectives? So we are also cheating our white men brothers. The third argument is it takes away from teachers' time to prepare students for standardized tests. This is the big debate we have now in good old US of way. Testing teachers, no child left behind. 8 years later, we find out that all the children have been left behind. So the supporters argue state standards can still be used, but they can even recover more by complete and accurate way from the brother perspective, not only from a Eurocentric perspective. And the last argument is that opponents say focuses on differences instead of commonalities and just ask issues of race, gender, class, etc. And supporters counter issues of race, gender, class, etc. We are always there. So it's not like these people are now saying, let's include other people who are now making this thing. It was always there. And all they are saying is that everybody counts. Every culture counts. Every thinking counts. And we have to incorporate them in our curriculum. So what is this African perspective we can include? Of course, I just took a few of these. This is one of the misnomer. When they talk about African centrism, they always say, oh, Afrocentrism, they just want to make black folks feel good. Well, believe it or not, there are a lot of white, strong African-centered scholars, like Massey, Martin Bernal, and many others, and Basil Davison. Why? Because they studied, they lived. They spent time in museums and archives, digging and getting knowledge to show that these folks were not just sitting there beating their time. So in addition to the W.B. Du Bois, the Chekantajo, and the Kwame Nkrumah, there are also a lot of white scholars that contributed to the African Center thinking. We also need to celebrate them. That means we have to read. We have to go beyond our nice confines of black boxes. Academic areas that employ them, there are tons of them, from psychology, from anthropology, theology, to history, to linguistics. We have to let people know that there are areas that are very much covered. We have to know the history of African centricism. Way back, not today, goes back to the BCs, the great books. What they call the Book of the Dead, Annis. How many of us have read that in our college education, as we say in America? We haven't. Because it's not part of the curriculum. So people were already writing books thousands of years ago, have already established scholarship thousands of years ago, before we are now rehashing many of the things that we're talking about. We have to know the major pioneers, and there are many. We have to know the major questions that guide the African-centered thinking. What is the unique history of black people? What is the unique cognitive style of black people? Believe it or not, what I did in my book on pedagogy, andragogy, heterogogy, and ubuntugogy is a completely different learning styles. Why? Because culture, as you and I know, undergirds the way we learn, the way we perceive the world, the way we see things. It has nothing to do with our skin color. Because we now know of the 500,000 pairs of genes, only one pair explains the difference of our color of skin. It has nothing to do with that, what anthropologists call race. And that's why if you go to the Pacific, you see someone who is very dark skinned like me, with blonde hair and blue eyes. Why? That is the Creator's way to tell us that we are much more similar, 99% similar, than we are different. So why do we spend so much energy in emphasizing or overemphasizing that very one pair of gender expressions in common? We have to look at theories. These scholars have developed theories time immemorial that go back from the two cradles to the analogical symbols to the Kwarada, to the African code, to the negritude, analysis of acculturation, linguistic constancy, on and on and on. Anybody interested, just send me an email, I will email you the paper. One of the things I do, I make no presentation without writing a paper. It forces me to think outside the box. Major journals that students can consult: the Journal of Black Psychology, Journal of Black Studies, African Archaeology Review, African Studies Review, Journal of African History, and Current Anthropology that deal with these issues. And there are a lot of works I can cite. So to understand African centricism in our curriculum, we have to look at the pre-conceptualization. Nobody's making these things up. That there was already Africans, there was already African, there was already all these things, even before some aspects of European things. Let's take fractals, for example. We attribute fractals to Mandelbrot. Where did he learn it? When you begin to trace the history of fractals, they begin to go back all the way to Africa, which was taken by the Islamic mystics who brought it to Rome, to Spain. And of course, the greatest time in the Spanish Empire was when Christians, Muslims, and Jews worked together to create a great empire under Islamic rule. And of course, you know that led to the Renaissance. So when cultures, when thought processes collaborate and work, the power comes out. We know that because we have historical precedents for those developments. We have to talk about the conceptualization, where these things form. We have to talk about the concretion, when do they become concretized? And that's what we are now struggling with. How do we make sure that they are accepted as legitimate canons within academia? This is where the fight comes in. Pre-conceptualization, I just put you some pictures for you to see the great thinkers. from Du Bois all the way to C.R. James. Conceptualization, people check out that joke. A great mighty work, John Henry Clark. And now we are now in the new era with Boniface Asante, who I think was here in Canada, I don't know which university, not too long ago. And of course the great Twin Falola, who had written more than 115 books. And a lot of other great thinkers like Maulana Kareem and others. So it's not that the works are not out there, they are there. As I told you, we have great white scholars in this concretization period. Barry Fair, Drusilla Jones, and others. J. Rogers. Ivan Van Satima, who I believe was a Canadian, had Canadian citizenship, Caribbean origin. We have Gerald Massey. Yeah. And now Islamic Center. That is now the new boogeyman. We've defeated communism, now Islamists are new threat. Why? Because they are so different. This Muslim they weird. They pray 5 times a day. They take off their shoes and pray. Yeah. You tell me which one of those prophets, from the first one, Noah, all the way to Jesus, all the way to Moses, all the way to Muhammad, that did not go into the holy place to receive the scriptures without taking off their shoes. And we'll see. There are major Islamic concepts, like the word Allah. I was on a radio show one day, and one of these wonderful Christian brothers called Muslims making up name Allah. What the hell is Allah? There's no such thing. So I said, my brother, Jesus Christ called God Allah. Because in the Aramaic language, the word for God is what? Allah. So if we know that Jesus came from the Aramaic language, Aramaic group, then he must have called God Allah. So Muslims are not going around making up names. This is the original name. Islam and Western democracy, we talk about that. There's always this myth. Islam is completely antithetical to Western democracy. You'll be surprised where some of our Western democratic tenets emerge from. Islam and human rights. The problem is Muslims don't have human rights. They don't respect human rights. Myth. Not only do Muslims have all the 22 covenants of the international human rights, they even have more human rights that the world is not even ready for yet. Let me name you some. Okay, about democracy, governed by consent. Surah 3, 139, Surah 42, 38, from the Holy Quran. Equality, Article 1 of the Declaration of Human Rights, Surah 49, 13, Surah 23, 101. And for every one of those covenants we're talking about international human rights, we have 6 surahs that deal with those things. And when I train imams and journalists and ministers from Muslim countries in Washington, D.C., I have a PowerPoint presentation, Islam and Human Rights. They said, we wish we had had this stuff before. But now we can even argue with our leaders, our rulers, that what we are demanding is there. But we just did not have the ability to piece all of this stuff together. Justice and freedom of political opinion, 1 article. Islam, 6 surahs. Home, privacy and protection, 2 articles in the human rights. Islam, 14 surahs. Intellectual freedom and education, 1 article in the human rights. Islam, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 surahs. Freedom of speech and assembly. Believe it or not, Islam teaches freedom of speech and assembly, even though some of our rulers don't want us to speak. until we have an Arab Spring. 2 human rights articles. We have 16 surahs that emphasizes that in the Quran. Earning a living, rest and leisure, 1 article. Islam, 3 surahs for that. Enjoying the lawful welfare and government, 3 articles. Islam, 7 surahs. And then we can skip all of those because we now got the message. And then we have even surahs that the world is not ready for. Like we have 6 surahs. The resistance of corruption. Where the Quran says it's a human right for you not to engage in corrupt practices. Are we even in the West ready for that sort of human right? No. Because in Washington, corruption only happens in Africa. Only happens in Pakistan. Only happens in India. Only happens in any other country. For us in the US, it is lobbying. Even the language used camouflage these things. Right of the vulnerable, the poor, and the orphan, as a human right. We don't have international covenants. For the sanctity of your wealth, we don't have it in international covenants. Rights of relatives. Now we can divorce our parents. What about their rights? After they are dusters, slept, didn't have sleep for 18, 14, 16 years, now we can just run away. What about their rights? It's not a human right in international covenants. In fact, to support the rights of relatives. And last but not the least, what about your rights? Do you have a rule yourself to treat yourself with dignity, to treat yourself with care, to treat yourself not to poison your body, to treat yourself not to engage in certain acts? That's a human right to yourself that Islam emphasizes. Quickly. Charles Stevens used to be a drug addict. Now he's what? Use of Islam. And he's won all kinds of peace awards for promoting peace among races and various religious groups all around the world. Ronnie Sullivan, world champion pool. The great famous Sanders photographer of all these great magazines you see all around the world. Murad Hoffman, German ambassador to the United Nations. He was once Assistant Secretary General. Joseph Estes, ex-Christian minister, who used to be, believe it or not, the minister of George W. Bush's church. Amin Aslimi, former radical feminist, who is now a journalist for one of the great newspapers in the UK. Lord Henley, British statesman and editor. Mario Schialoja, the Italian ambassador to the United Nations for many, many years. One of the most loved and cherished. Lieutenant Raheda Ramahai, she's now really 2-star general in the US Navy. Yvonne Ridley of the Guardian newspaper, one of the most tenacious, most famous writers. General Charles Buchanan, nephew of former US President James Buchanan. Jeffrey Lyle, Kansas State, Nobel Prize winner, and great mathematician. And of course, the greatest of all time, Muhammad Ali. What do they all have in common? They are all Muslims, and they were all Christians. Why did they revert? If Islam was such a bad thing. In the United States, Congressman Keith Ellison is taking the oath on Thomas Jefferson's Quran. And when you go to the National Museum, Historical Museum, you see Thomas Jefferson's Bible. What did he do? He took the Bible and rearranged it according to the Quran. Just to show that we're fighting about these small little differences, few differences, when the overwhelming majority of the revelations are saying the same thing. It's become one of the most famous and most popular congressmen, because of his honesty, his straightforwardness. Rabbis, Christian ministers work with him in communities. And he's won every election ever since. Because of him, we now have Congressman Rick Carson. We now have Congresswoman Gwen Moore. But people are now seeing these are people who care about their constituencies, want to make a difference in people's lives. Passing behind the label Muslim terrorists. What is the meaning of Islam? Linguistic meaning, surrender, purity, peace. That's all it means. It's like meaning if a person fully surrenders himself to Almighty God alone, worshiping Him purely, believe in peace and harmony in his life and in the afterlife. So everything we do, it's not just for here, it's for after. Muslim, a person who submits to God. So anybody, a Christian, a Jew, Islam says is a Muslim. Because the Quran says it over and over again. To be a good Muslim, you have to accept all the precepts of all the prophets from Judaism all the way to Christianity, all the way to Islam. Or else you're not a Muslim. So these foolish people who bomb buildings and all that, oh, we're going to kill infidels. If there's one Christian or one Jew that building you kill him, it's like killing a whole nation. So they are not taught correctly. They are terrorists. They are not Muslims. They might use the name conveniently for their foolish acts, but it has nothing to do with Islam. 6 beliefs. Belief in the Almighty, all the Abrahamic faiths do. Believe in the angels, all the Abrahamic faiths do. Believe in the scriptures, all the Abrahamics do, but we try to select the books that we want to believe in. Only Islam accepts all 3 books. Believing in his messenger, they all do. All of them say the Archangel Gabriel is the foremost angel that brought all those messages. 100% correct. So they were not corruptible. It's we humans that misinterpret and misrepresent what the revelations say. Believing in the day of resurrection, all 3 believe. In the destiny, all of them believe. Allah, there's no deity worship worthy of worship than Allah. Allah is the proper name of the noun. Arab Christian Jews call the deity Allah as well as 15 times in the first page of the Christian Bible in Arabic. Before the revelations came, already had the word Arabic when it was translated. Here we go. So Muslims are not making these things up. No, let's just have this name Allah, so we can be terrorists. What else do we know? The Torah, Gospel, Quran, Gabriel carried them to message 100% correct. The Quran is the only book that has been maintained in this original language, Arabic, not translated. If you see the translated version, what is the rule? The Arabic has to be on one side and the translation has to be on the other, so one can compare and match them. Quran and modern science are compatible. If Galileo lived in Islamic Spain during his time, he would not have encountered the same fate he encountered under the Roman Catholic hegemony in these days. Because Muslims were encouraged to pursue science, were encouraged to inquire, even to challenge, to question some of the things that some religions did not want to do. How do you explain all? Let's just say now, about 15,000 years ago, container that only has been discovered not too long ago. Religion, science are associated in Islam. Many Muslim scholars are considered among the greatest scientists of their time. Very well-known physician, the canon of medicine, and the book of Hill, who we call the modern world, the father of modern medicine. This guy, Hawken, the father of chemistry. Those of us who do mathematics, we did with that algorithms, right? Algorithm invented algebra. That's the guy that makes us suffer in our college degree. Oh no, I have to go through trigonometry, algebra too. These guys had no life. They sat there just thinking about all this weird stuff. Recognize the father of modern surgery. Look at the tools he invented. Don't they look the same thing they still use in the hospitals? Just modernized, looking nice. geology, biology, embryology, physics, astronomy. It is he who created the night and the day and the sun and the moon and the swim along with it in an orbit until we begin to have sound sonogram. Not too long ago, that's when we discovered it, but it was already in the Quran told us this. Some people in the moon. That's when we knew this. 60s, early 70s. Physiology, yes, we are able to fashion in perfect order at the very tips of his fingers. Forensics. When did we know that every human being has his or her own unique fingerprints? In the 70s. With forensics science. Well, it was already in the Quran 1500 years before then. He creates you stage by stage with mother's womb in a threefold darkness. That is God, your Lord. Sovereignty is his. There is no God but him. So what has made you deviate? The life of the uterus has 3 stages, pre-embryonic, embryonic, and fetal, right? 1500 years ago, he was already in the Quran. Read in the name of your Lord who created man from a thing that clings. Read, and your Lord is the most generous. And here we are. Example.
Well, I mean, because it's difficult to see the
Oh, it's
the yellow.
The yellow. Okay. And here we are. Is that not how we all began? How did we find these things out? Wrong. And the yellow is good.
Is that too dark? Can you
for the camera?
Yeah.
Sorry.
That's okay. They will finish. The yellows will finish. The environment. Yes, let's put the two seas converging together with a barrier between them. They do not break through. What is the law? Salinity, density, temperature, currents. Because of the physical force called surface tension, the waters of neighboring seas do not mix. Caused by a difference in the density of the waters, surface tension prevents them from mingling with one another. All you got to do is take a ride where the Niles converge to get to Egypt. The one that comes from Uganda, another place, the one that comes from Somalia, place, never converge. They come and they go separate ways like that. It's very wonder. It's a wonder when you take. I've taken the boat ride 3-4 times just to keep seeing it again to understand. This is in the Quran 1500 years. Now we are discovering. Prophet Muhammad was not the founder of Islam. The Quran says it repeatedly. We did not give you a new religion. We just gave you to continue with those traditions. And you have to respect the teachings of the earlier prophets. These traditions are considered second source of Islamic knowledge and legislation, which now we have in the Hadith. Before becoming a prophet, they used to call him trustworthy and truthful. And he made it very clear, do not put me on the pedestal. I'm just an ordinary human being. God just gave me the opportunity to bring the word, that's all. Don't worship me, don't make any holidays, don't celebrate my birthday. Some Muslims are doing it now. We have to go make that corrective. Because that was not what the prophet taught. What did Lamartine say? If greatness of purpose, manners of means, and understanding results are the 3 criteria of human genius, who could dare to compare any great man in modern history with Muhammad? This is the great Western minds that we are now saying this. But not sure. The great Western thinker. I believe that if a man like him were to assume the leadership of the modern world, he would succeed in solving his problems in a way that would bring to this world much needed peace and happiness. Wolfgang Goethe. Go to Germany, got all these Goethe institutes. Great German thinker. He's a prophet and not a poet, and therefore his Quran is to be seen as a divine law and not as a book of human being made for educational entertainment. And last but not the least, there are so many of them. My choice for one man to read the list of the world's most influential. It surprised some readers and maybe it's questioned by others. But he was the only man in history who was successful at both the religious and secular level. It is this unparalleled combination of secular and religious influence which I feel entitles Muhammad to be considered the most influential single figure in human history. These are all great Western thinkers. Day of judgment, the one none of us want to think about, but it will come. And all the Revelation says, the good plus your bad. So it's not just going to mosque, going to church, going to the synagogue, everything. No, no, no. It's what you do with your deeds. It's what is going to balance the scales. The bad side balances, bam, you go where we don't want to talk about. The good side balances, and you get that blessing, that eternal life. Resurrection, reading our book, accountability, fear, trial, and judgment, paradise or hell, eternal life. Divine destiny, nothing happens without His knowledge. By His knowledge, He prescribes everything. God knows what happened, what is happening, what will happen, and He knows the fourth. No human being has been able to know. And that is, He knows what will not happen, if it happened, how it will happen. And that is what we are spending all our lifetime in this universe to discover. No medical doctor, no medical student will ever tell you how death really happens. They'll tell you processes, the things that you go through. Nobody has been able to pinpoint how that life gets out. You cannot. Maybe it's something. 5 deeds. Know the ethical God, Muhammad the messenger, establishing prayer, praying financial obligations, zakat. It's your responsibility to help your fellow humans. Fasting the month of Ramadan and making pilgrimage when you can afford it. Don't get into debt, don't go steal just to be in pilgrimage. It's not acceptable. Financial obligation, 2.5% of any cash savings held for 1 year, 5% 10% of any agricultural income, 20% for any extracted resources of mineral, the right of the poor of the rich. Zakat, the growth of purification, is mandatory. The big issues of the day, gender. Because Islam makes Muslims oppress their women. No. Hijab, status of women. Would anybody want your sister or your mom to wear this? Yeah, you brothers are smiling. You see our sisters here, you go all one, ooh, baby. Right? But as soon as they say, would you like your sister or your mom to wear this? It's a different thing. What the hell? No. My mom, my sister, somebody else, yeah, I can enjoy. Those Muslims are weird. They hijab, they cover. Well, believe me or not. When did you ever see Mother Teresa without a hijab? When did you see the Virgin Mother Mary in Islam, Maryam, the #1 woman in Islam? When have you ever seen a picture of Maryam without a hijab? And this was one of our first female Muslim Student Association president at my university, who is like neurosurgeon. Had nothing to do with oppressing you or your abilities. It's a culture. It's a way to help us men, not the women. When we pray, we are tempted. If you're supposed to be connected to other 100%, it's better we don't smell our sisters smelling good, standing next to us. We're going to be distracted. Got nothing to do with the women. It's us men that are the weaklings. Oh yeah, that woman just bowed and look at that butt. Oh baby. Your prayer is all square. So it is our own insecurity. That's why. It has nothing to do with a woman. Nothing wrong with it. Some of the most powerful women in history have been Muslim women. From Queen Amina of Zaria, who fought the British for 23 years, riding a horse, fighting in front of the military. All the way to the Algerian revolutionary hero Jamila Boussaid, who the French had to massacre because she turned the Algerian revolution upside his head and led Algeria to gain its independence. It was a woman. We always credit the Benbelas and stuff. These people were just theories, they were talkers. This woman gave up a prime career and took up guns and organized women to fight. Muslim women just not sit around looking beautiful and doing that. The great Nana Asmoa challenged the so-called scholars of Castilla, challenging them in fiqh, until they made her the principal teacher within the courts, teaching the imam and the sheikhs. If women are oppressed, it's not because Quran said that. It was because of what we do. We've had women heads of states and very important people, even before we still have not had a woman president in America or in France. Only recently we have somebody in Germany, and then we had one in Britain some time ago. But most of the so-called big Western democracies have not had a woman head of state. Bhutto, elected twice. Bangladesh, back to back, now they have a woman again. Because whenever the men come in Bangladesh, they mess up, begin to fight, begin to make trouble. When the women come, there is peace, Bangladesh is growing, they say, look, we don't want men anymore, let's bring women again. So there's something we Muslim men got to learn from our women. Sri Mulyani Rawati, current Minister of Finance, poised to be the next Prime Minister of Indonesia. She's going to win. The polls already favor her. Why? Because, again, when we come down and lower our gaze and begin to see reality, we can see the potential and the strength of our women. Status of women, all men are equal before God, all men are equal before the law. They are both subject to be equally rewarded or equally punished. God is not going to feel sorry for the woman. Oh, she's a woman, let's don't give her enough punishment. Because, no, you get the same deal. And one of the things when I say this sometimes, my African brothers in the USA, please don't talk too loud. You are responsible to take care of the house and the woman 100%. You pay for everything. It's not 50-50. Oh, baby, let's go out on a date. You pay 50, I pay, you pay everything. Okay? If on her own volition, she wants to give you some, she can. But you can never make it, oh, we got to share. Oh, let me pay the mortgage and all that. You pay the water and all. No, you pay everything. It's your responsibility. The woman, her check is her check. Your check is your both check. And don't get into the habit. Don't even think about it. Oh, I'm Abdul Kareem Bengura. I'm going to marry a woman. Now she's going to be Mrs. Bengura. Hell no. She keeps her name. I keep my name. No, that Mrs. stuff. It's not Islam. Okay? So again, there are so many things. Sometimes we deviate from the actual teachings, and that's where we get our problems. In some, any society, when individual oppresses women, discriminating against them, it's against Islam, not because of it. Jihad, one of those things that we always hear about. Oh, well, the jihadis have struck again. And you have some dumb guys who call themselves Muslim, I'm doing this in the name of jihad. You're helping. In my book, Keyboard Jihad, the misrepresentation, misperceptions of Islam, I talked about a whole chapter on that. You're helping those Westerners who want to frame jihad as this bad thing. It got nothing to do with your foolishness. You don't go bomb a building, you don't go bomb a plane, you don't go bomb people sitting there minding their own business, got nothing to do with your problem, and you call it, I'm doing it in the name of, yeah, that's foolishness. Striving, struggling is jihad. Has to be a non-violent struggling with oneself for a life of virtue. By saying the truth, even if it's against your own interest, that's jihad. Fighting to establish justice is a supreme goal. Now, I'm going to be very honest. Islam is not pacifistic. Islam does not say you cannot take arms and fight. Wherever there is justice, Islam also forces you. It tells you have to take arms and fight, but only in the case of injustice. And the Prophet went through it. When he had the upper hand, the revelation came from Allah through Angel Gabriel. Now you have the upper hand. Now you are the one to sue for peace. So there are so many laws, so many rules. Even when you have the upper hand, that you should respect, that you should follow. And once you have the advantage, you should sue for peace. And a great story, of course, of the nephew of the Prophet is a good one, Ali. He and this unbeliever fought. Finally was able to knock the guy down, went to finish him up, the guy spat in his face. Ali took his sword, put it away, and brought him home. The guy said, why are you doing this? I would have killed you if you were down there. He said, because now I'm angry at you. If I killed you, it wasn't out of self-defense. It would have been because I was angry, because it spat in my face, even though I had the upper hand. That is Islam. And that is jihad. Jihad, others in the tradition, never kill innocent people. Never injure prisoners of war. Never kill animals. Never destroy crops. Never destroy infrastructure. Never mutilate bodies of enemies, dead or alive. So all those foolish people who kill Americans or Westerners and put their bodies on truck and drag them down, they are stupid. That is not Islam. You're not supposed to mutilate the body and do that. And when I travel to this country, I say it. Some of them may not like it, but the truth. All prisoners should be given fair treatment. Women, children, and adults should be protected from harm. Always bury all dead with respect. So it was crazy that Muammar Gaddafi's body can stay down in a public thing for them to look, and they call a great country like Libya a Muslim country. Unacceptable. 1400 years before the Geneva Convention, Islam already said this is how we should treat our fellow humans. So there's a great hope for the make-belief. Great hope for the make-belief. I see pictures, I see efforts, I read about them. Even kids. And today I got the thin respect. That's why I got my body. To believe in respect. How coincidental. There's a Canadian action plan against racism. No one is illegal to stop racism. So there are movements. And always I tell my students, get involved. Get involved. Because the ancient Egyptian tells us true knowledge. It's not just unuma, not just the abstract and the conceptualization. True knowledge also comes from unuma, the action they're doing, which makes it concrete and therefore engages in performance. If you can just do, if you can just say, and you don't get involved, you just learn these things, just read and write papers, get your A's, you don't get involved, you don't get true knowledge. Because only unuma plus Rayman, you get lose. And in my final words, as the ancient Egyptians tell us, and I always write in my email to my letters, which means whatever we do, we should always do in peace. Thank you.